Level 1, the street runner. You are 17 years old and you have nothing. No trade, no connections, no family name that opens any doors. You live in the lower districts of a mid-tier city on a planet that nobody important has ever visited. The streets smell like engine grease and rain that hasn't fallen in 3 weeks. You run packages for a courier operation that may or may not move contraband alongside the legitimate deliveries.
You don't ask.
Asking is how people get replaced. One afternoon, a man in a worn leather coat watches you sprint 6 blocks to beat a deadline. He's leaning against a wall with his arms crossed. He has a badge on his belt, not law enforcement, something older and rougher than that.
A guild seal.
You've seen them before on wanted postings nailed to transit station walls. He hands you a card. His firm needs runners who know the district layout and don't stop moving when things get loud.
You take the job.
Your first assignment is simple. Locate a skip, a man who jumped bail on a freight theft charge, and report his position back to the senior hunter.
Don't engage. Don't follow him inside.
Just establish a pattern of movement and call it in. You spend 4 days eating cold food on fire escapes watching a man who has no idea you exist. You learn his schedule the way you learned the courier routes, through repetition and boredom and paying attention when everyone else has stopped.
You call it in.
The senior hunter makes the arrest. You get paid a flat finder's fee. It's not much. You go back the next day and ask for another assignment. There is no dramatic moment, no confrontation, no speech about justice. Just patience, bad food, and a man who doesn't know you're watching him buy breakfast every morning at the same stall.
Level 2, the licensed apprentice.
You've been doing this for 2 years. You have a provisional license issued by the regional guild chapter. It allows you to assist licensed hunters on active warrants, carry a sidearm in the performance of official duties, and formally enter the guild database as a registered operative. You are not yet permitted to execute an arrest independently. You are the second set of hands on someone else's operation. Your supervising hunter is a woman named Wraith. She has 17 years in the field, a jaw that looks like it was set wrong after a break, and zero interest in explaining things more than once. She teaches by doing and expects you to keep up. On your first assisted takedown, you freeze for 2 seconds at the wrong moment.
She doesn't yell.
She just looks at you afterward with an expression that makes yelling seem preferable.
You don't freeze again.
You learn to read a file the way she reads a file, not for the official charges but for the behavioral patterns underneath. Where a skip goes when they're scared. What they'll sacrifice to feel safe. Who they'll call when they run out of options. The paperwork tells you what a person did. The margins tell you who they are. Wraith taught you that distinction. You work 17 assisted arrests over 14 months. Your record is clean, no excessive force complaints, no procedural violations, no missed warrants. You apply for full licensure. The Guild Review Board interviews you for 45 minutes in a room with no windows. They ask questions designed to find the edges of your judgment. You answer without performing. They grant the license 6 weeks later.
You are a bounty hunter. Officially. Legally. On paper.
Going out alone the first time will make you understand how little that last part means. Level 3, the independent operator.
Solo work is different.
Nobody is behind you. Nobody is making decisions in parallel. When you knock on a door, you are the only authorized party on the other side of whatever opens. That weight is either something you can carry or it will fold you inside a year. Most new independents find out which category they belong to very quickly. Your territory is a mid-sized port city with a rotating skip population. People who jump bail here tend to transit through rather than settle, which means you are frequently working against a clock. A skip who reaches the orbital platforms becomes a jurisdiction problem, and a jurisdiction problem means paperwork, delays, and a payout that shrinks the longer it sits unresolved. You develop a methodology. Cross-reference the warrant details against transit manifests. Check known associate addresses before surveillance. Associates get complacent faster than principals. Build a contact network in the parts of the city that guild headquarters considers beneath official attention. A maintenance worker who monitors service corridors sees more movement in a district than any licensed operative running a surveillance drone from altitude.
You make mistakes.
You misjudge a skip who presented as low risk and arrive at a collection point without accounting for a second party. Nothing fatal happens, but it is close enough that you sit in your vehicle for 20 minutes afterward running the sequence through your head, finding every decision point where you chose wrong. You adjust the methodology.
You go back out.
Year 1 as an independent, 23 warrants, 21 collections, 1 jurisdictional loss, 1 skip still outstanding when the statute limit closes the warrant.
You want better numbers.
Whether that drive is a professional asset or a personal problem, you haven't fully worked out.
Probably it's both. Level 4, the regional contractor.
A guild chapter in the northern districts contracts you for a 3-month placement. They have a backlog of warrants their staff hunters can't clear and need additional capacity. The pay is better than independent work. The cases are harder.
You relocate.
You live out of a rented room above a machine parts warehouse. Industrial solvent gets into everything you own by the end of the first week. You don't particularly care. The regional contract introduces you to a category of skip you haven't encountered in volume before, the institutional jumper. People who don't run impulsively but plan their disappearance with deliberate patience. They've prepared a secondary identity, transferred assets slowly over months, built a new life in a district with no overlap against their old one. Catching them requires investigation rather than field surveillance, financial trail analysis, identity cross-referencing, behavioral modeling over time rather than space. You find that you are good at this. Your longest case in that placement runs 11 weeks. The skip is a mid-level logistics administrator who embezzled from a freight consortium and jumped her security bond before trial. She has been living under a secondary name for 4 years, calm and methodical, doing nothing to draw attention. You find her because she applied for a professional certification under her new name that required a background check, and the check referenced an educational credential that, traced backward through 3 institutional databases, connects to a physical address from 6 years prior sharing a property tax record with her original identity. 11 weeks of patient cross-referencing to find a single thread.
You pull it.
She's in custody within 48 hours.
You don't feel triumphant.
You feel like you did the work correctly.
Level 5, the senior hunter.
You are 31 years old. You've been licensed for 9 years. You have a reputation in 4 regional guild chapters. Your calls get returned, your requests for information don't sit in queues. It accumulated through consistency, not through any single case.
You take on an apprentice. Her name is Davin.
She is 22, aggressive in the field, with reflexes that would make senior operators half her age uncomfortable. Her instincts are strong and her judgment is developing. Your job is to accelerate that development without removing what makes her effective. It is harder than any solo case you have worked. Twice in the first 6 months, you have to physically restrain her from escalating a collection beyond what the warrant authorizes. The first time, the skip had been verbally abusive and she took it personally. You explain once that a skip being a contemptible person is not a variable that affects the execution of a lawful warrant. The second time, the skip surrendered a weapon without using it and she moved to neutralize him anyway. That conversation is longer and harder and she doesn't fully accept it for another 4 months.
She becomes good.
The foundation was already there. You gave her enough structured experience to calibrate it. You don't enjoy the mentor role the way people expect you to. It is draining in ways solo fieldwork isn't. But when Davin clears her full licensure exam on the first attempt and her name appears in the regional guild database under independent operative status, something settles in your chest that you don't have a name for and don't try to find one. Level 6, the guild specialist. The guild chapter in your city offers you a specialist position, active field work on high-complexity warrants, combined with consultation on cases that have gone cold or involve investigative challenges beyond standard operative capacity.
You accept. The work changes.
You are no longer purely reactive, pursuing assigned warrants through established methodology. You are asked to think about categories of problem rather than individual cases. Why certain skip profiles cluster in certain districts. Why a particular bail bondsman's portfolio has an anomalously high jump rate. Whether a series of apparently unrelated warrant jumps suggests coordination. You identify a pattern that 3 other hunters had each noticed separately but never connected. A fraud attorney in the commercial district has been coaching high-value skips on optimal timing for warrant jumps, advising clients on jurisdictional gaps between municipal and regional enforcement windows. 7 warrants over 2 years, each timed precisely to exploit a 4-day notification lag in the transfer protocol between court systems. You build the case documentation and turn it over to the guild's legal affairs division. The attorney's license is suspended pending criminal investigation. None of those 7 skips become your arrests. You built the case to correct a systemic problem, not to generate individual payouts. You find that more satisfying than you expected, which tells you something about where you are now versus where you started. Level 7, the regional director.
You are 39.
The chapter offers you the regional director position. You stop taking field assignments. That is the hardest part. Not the administrative load, not the budget management, not the personnel reviews, not the interagency coordination meetings with law enforcement liaisons who have spent 30 years treating guild operatives as a nuisance to be tolerated. All of that is manageable. The hard part is that you no longer go out. You manage 43 licensed operatives across a regional territory. You review warrants, assign cases, adjudicate disputes, appear before guild review boards when an operative under your oversight generates a complaint. You sit in rooms with magistrates and consortium legal officers and explain why the guild's methods are sound. You lose 2 operatives in 3 years. One is injured on a collection that escalates beyond the risk assessment. She recovers and returns to active status after 7 months. One is killed during a warrant execution that goes wrong in 3 simultaneous ways, none of which were predictable from the pre-operation intelligence. He is 26 years old. He has a brother in the agricultural districts who has never been to the city. You handle the notification personally. You sit across from the brother and tell him what you can, which is not everything, and watch him understand that his brother is not coming back. You take the long transit home and sit in your office looking at the operative's case file. You make 3 procedural changes to the regional risk assessment protocol the following month. They might prevent the same convergence from occurring again. There is nothing else the role allows you to do with it. Level 8, the Guild Executive. You are 46. The National Guild Board appoints you to a directorial seat. You oversee policy, inter-regional coordination, legislative liaison work, and the Guild's formal relationship with law enforcement across 12 jurisdictions. You haven't personally executed a warrant in 7 years. The work at this level is almost unrecognizable from what you did on those fire escapes. You sit at long tables with officials from agencies that once viewed the Guild as a competitor. You argue for standardized licensing protocols that would raise the professional floor across all registered operatives. You push for information sharing agreements that would give Guild operatives access to court databases currently closed to private licensees. You lose most of these arguments on the first attempt and revisit them through different approaches over months and years. Some of them eventually move. The cases from your field years, the 11-week fraud trail, the institutional pattern analysis, the attorney with a coordinated timing scheme, you carry them as reference points. You use them to explain to officials who have never worked in the field why certain procedural changes would produce better outcomes.
It is slow.
It is often unrewarding. You do it anyway. You receive a complaint from an operative in the Western chapter who believes the new risk assessment protocol is overly restrictive. He is 28, talented, and frustrated by constraints he hasn't accumulated enough experience to understand. You read his complaint carefully. Some of what he says is correct. You adjust the protocol in one specific area and send him a direct response explaining which part of his argument held and which didn't, and why the rest of it didn't. He writes back to thank you. You save the message, which is not something you normally do. Level 9, the retired operative. You left the directorial seat 14 months ago. Your replacement was a woman you helped develop through the specialist program 12 years prior. That feels like a reasonable outcome. You live in a house near the outer districts. It has a courtyard with a stone bench and a tree that produces something approximating fruit in the warm season. You sit on the bench in the mornings. The city sounds are distant enough to be ambient rather than operational. You are slowly, incrementally, unlearning the reflex of treating ambient sound as potential data. Your hands still move to check for the sidearm you no longer carry. Davin is now a regional director in the Southern Territories. She sends periodic updates, professional summaries dressed as personal correspondence. You read them carefully and occasionally write back with a question she already knows the answer to, because sometimes the question is more useful. Your right knee still doesn't work the way it once did. 3 years ago a physician told you the cartilage damage was consistent with sustained high-impact work over decades and asked what you did for a living.
You told her.
She made no comment, scheduled the procedure, and performed it professionally. It helped, though not entirely. At this point, not entirely is about the best available result. You are asked to speak at a guild apprentice orientation.
You accept.
You stand in front of 42 people between 19 and 26. They are attentive and skeptical in equal measure, the way people are when they believe they already understand the profession they are entering. You recognize the expression. You tell them the field will ask for patience they don't yet have, and judgment that no training program fully teaches. You tell them the cases that mark them will not always be the dramatic ones. You tell them to build a methodology and then rebuild it when it stops working. You tell them the work has a gravity to it that pulls everything else toward the margin if they let it, and to take care of the people who take care of them.
They listen.
Some of them understand now. The rest will get there from the field, and you can see by looking at them that they don't believe that yet. You shake hands on the way out. Some of those hands belong to people who will still be working this job in 30 years. Some will wash out before the year closes. You can't tell which is which, and neither can they. That uncertainty will follow them through every stage of what comes next, and they will eventually stop minding it. Somewhere in a mid-district recruitment office, a 17-year-old with good legs and a sense of direction is taking a card from a man in a worn leather coat. The kid thinks this is simple work. Track someone, find them, collect a fee. He has no idea yet what simple is going to cost him, or how long he'll spend finding out.